Please welcome the incredible Laura. I'm gonna start over again. Good start. Good start. Here we go. Okay. Please welcome the incredible Laura Beauparlant.
Thanks for having me, Renee. So excited to be chatting with you.
So I'm gonna say your name in the French way because the French would say Beauparlant.
Oui,
Beauparlant.
mais
Oui,
oui.
oui. So are you still in Italy?
No, we
Oh,
are back in Toronto.
wow. So
Yeah,
how many months were you out there for?
10 months. Yeah,
Okay.
picked up the family, rented out our house, and had a big life adventure.
So how long have you been home for now?
About a month and a half. So settling into our house, figuring out where our goal is to bring some of our Italian life into our Toronto life.
Yes. Italy is
That's what we
just
want.
fantastic. It is like, I don't know. If you've never been, you got to go. There's something
Yeah.
so special about that. So coming home, was it, is it fun to be home? Did you miss it? Or like, how do you feel?
It was bittersweet. Like leaving was bittersweet. We were ready. The kids wanted to come home. They wanted to see friends and family. So there was a lot of things we missed from home. And now there's lots of things that we miss from there.
Yeah.
And I think isn't it beautiful to have people and things that you miss?
Yeah. That's
Like
the thing.
that's such a gift now. And my kids are like, but we miss, these, my cousin's kids that they got to know. They're like, but we miss them. I'm like, but you didn't know them before. And now you can miss them. Like, how beautiful is that? You have
Yeah.
people to miss now. So that's
Mm.
cool. And it's been great to reconnect with family and friends and be, back in our house and, riding our bikes out, by the lake. So that's been great. But it's also, I found myself falling back into some old habits. I just sent out an email today about this, sliding back into some of the ways that I had been doing things and really kind of doing a self check to go, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
proved that I don't have to work that way while I was living abroad. Why would I need to do that just because I'm back in Toronto?
Isn't
So
that
I'm
crazy?
giving myself some checks.
The environment, I'm telling you, one of the things that is like the ultimate way to be productive and efficient is to be in the environment that gives you that sense of productivity and
Yeah.
inspiration and motivation.
Yeah.
And because you could be away for 10 months and create these incredibly beautiful habits, but you come back to the environment in which enabled bad habits, and guess what's going to happen?
Yep.
You're like, oh,
Yeah.
this was easy. This is the way it
I
always
end up
was. So my
I end up
brain
sitting.
automatically,
Yeah. I sit right here and spend too much time floundering when I could be out doing some deep thinking on a bike ride sitting by the lake. Or, yesterday I went and sat by the pool, our local pool with the kids, and like read a new book that I just gotten. I was like, this is also part of life and what I do as a business owner. It's the thinking and the things I do away from my computer. It's that feeling of I need to or I should be sitting here in order to be productive,
yeah,
right? The
totally.
shoulds. And I'm like, I don't need to be here all the time. I proved that I could work 4 to 6 hours a day while I was living abroad and still run my business.
That's my goal for the end of the year is to have all my systems in place to be able to reach my projected revenue goals while working at capacity of 30 hours a week. That was like the
Nice.
most.
Yeah.
And it
Just
seems like
because we're entrepreneurs doesn't mean we should be working 80 hours a week. These memes that go around about you quit your 40-hour a week job to work 80 hours as an entrepreneur. And there are times you're going to have crazy schedule and you're going to do these things, but that's also not sustainable and not healthy. And I believe that, we are more interesting as a well-rounded person who does things outside of our business. And
totally.
they also facilitate the stories that I talk to my clients all the time about injecting into your brand to help tell the story of what you do. But if you don't have anything except your business that you're doing, where are your stories going to come from?
So boring.
So boring.
So boring. You don't want to be boring because branding and creating a brand is the anti-boring, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're like. You're a woman that creates the anti-boring of a person or a company. So while we're
Yeah.
here, Tell us, what is it that you do?
Ooh, I help entrepreneurs create their impact-driven legacy brand.
I love
And
that.
really, to me, it starts with kind of an internal revolution. You have to go deep. You have to kind of shake things up and really figure out what it is that you want and the impact that you want to have in order to create the business and the brand that not just aligns with that, but that is built for the future generation, future of you, right? I don't want to create a brand that fits you today. It's got to feel a little bit like, ooh, that's a little uncomfortable, Laura. I'm like, if it makes you a little sweaty, but also excited at the same time, like maybe you kind of want to barf, but also feel like, ooh, I like this, then I always say we're on the right track.
It's just like we were talking about before recording, how we're talking about our hot flash instances. And I'm like, as soon as I sat down to press record, I got a hot flash. So maybe you make me feel uncomfortable.
I mean, my goal isn't to make people generally feel uncomfortable, but it is to challenge
Yeah.
those internal beliefs, those things that we think that we should do, as I mentioned, shoulds,
Mm-hmm.
the way that things have always been done in your industry, the way that other people are doing it doesn't mean that that's the way you have to do it. That is not how to stand out. When you have a brand and messaging that aligns with you, it's easy to put yourself out there because you're not pretending. You know, I remember people saying to me, Laura, you're always on brand. I'm like, that's because it's easy. I've created a business that is perfectly aligned with me. So no matter where you see me, LinkedIn or Facebook or in person or on a stage, you're always going to see the real Laura because I don't have to fake it anywhere. And that's
How
what
do
I
you
want to help people do.
Okay, so then in that, there's a lot of people that probably show up and they don't necessarily like who they are, or they don't feel like they have anything going for them. How do we find the thing that's going for us?
Well, and that's why the challenge when creatives start with design, you end up with a generic brand. And my background is design. I studied graphic design. I did it for many years. I have a graphic designer who works with me who's brilliant. But that design work falls flat unless you get really clear on the foundation of a brand and what it's all about. And so it really starts with that deep inner work that I mentioned. So, and you can't do it for yourself. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm boring and or I've only ever done this one thing, but everybody has something. Every single one of us is a unique being that has some interesting things that they've done or that we can create together. So for me, I take people through my brand camp methodology, and it's as fun as it sounds. And it's really about helping them get that clarity, but helping them see what they can't see. Most people say what they get most out of it is clarity and confidence. And from what you just said, it's those people who feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit unsure, like, oh, I'm not that special. I do the same thing as everybody else in my industry. And I help pull out the best of them and then put it into words and visuals in a way that they could never have imagined, but that feels perfect for them.
Because it takes sometimes someone else's perspective to really bring that out in you
Yeah,
and be like,
most of the time
wow,
it does.
that's how did you figure this part out? How did you get that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my magic.
Magic wand, poof.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. So, what got you into branding?
That's a great question. So, I mean, there's a bit of a backstory, but I had a different business. I actually had a custom wedding and event stationery business for 12 years that I ended up closing in 2016. And I was always doing design work for businesses along the way, a lot of people in the event space because I was in that world. And at some point, I realized that my revenue was actually higher from that than the invitations. And I was like, oh, this is a bit of a trigger. I should
Mm-hmm.
probably look at this.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll skip all the details, but the short story is,
The long story long
long
is
story long is, I'm like, that's not the right saying.
no.
I had a pivotal moment where I was addressing some clients' wedding envelopes. And I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm no longer doing this. Okay, I have to explain the whole story. Otherwise, it won't make sense. I'll make it quick. I was in a head-on collision with a drunk driver when I was 18. Fast forward 20 years. I put out a post on Facebook looking for the man who held my hand and kept me conscious while I was trapped in my car. And he was found within about 24 hours. The post went viral. It was like shared over 30,000 times, went around the world. And then I met this man who had basically held my hand, was the only person who just was there and comforted me. And I got to meet him in person and say thank you. And you know, meeting somebody who you've been looking for 20 years, it's kind of a big deal. And then I had a bit of an existential crisis because this big thing happened. And I looked at what I was doing in my business. And I'm like, I survived this so many years ago and I am thriving and I am meant for so much more. I have so much more to give this world and a bigger impact than this. And ironically, it was on the anniversary of my car accident that I was sitting there addressing these clients' wedding envelopes when I said, that's it. I'm done with this. This is not what I survived to be here to do. And so that kind of led down this, you know, I knew that was not, I was closing the door on that business, but like, what's next? So then that became the next big question. And it took me a number of months. And it was actually at a retreat that I was with on a leadership retreat where somebody kept asking me like, so, you know, what do you do? And asking me all these questions. And she's like, well, you do branding. I said, no, I'm a designer. Like that's other people do the messaging and the language. I'm not a wordsmith. I don't have an English degree. I don't have a brand strategy. Like I had that imposter syndrome rearing its ugly head. And she just kept pushing and really made me realize that is in fact what I do. I just couldn't see it for myself. As we just talked about, I needed somebody else to show me. I just needed to create my own process and methodology, which is where Brand Camp was born. And that was just over 7 years ago. And now I don't do any of the design work. I have a designer who does all of that. I do the art direction, which I love, but I've realized to me, it's the people, it's the connection. It's me seeing and understanding people and then helping them put the language to who they are to put that out into the world. So that is the short version of the long story.
The long story. So you've created this framework, this methodology, and you have a 3-step branding process. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I have it in a Venn diagram. So it's basically think, design, and amplify. And at the center of that is brand chemistry. And that's what I want everyone to create: chemistry within themselves and their team, and also chemistry with their dream clients. It's the name of my book. As you can see, it's called Brand Chemistry. So that's really what we're all about at Lab Creative. So think that's Brand Camp. That's where you do that deep inner work. That's all about the messaging, the tone, the language, positioning. Design is pretty self-explanatory. It's, you know, the color palette and the logo and the visual assets for social, website, photography, all of those details. And then amplify is storytelling. It's how you're reaching your audience. It's the positioning yourself to get in front of the right people and all of the tools that I've created to help people accelerate their brand, whether it's through coaching or other frameworks and structures that I've created to help them with that.
And how long does this process usually take?
So Brand Camp I do in one of a few ways. One is through a small group program that I run a few times a year. I have some people who do it self-guided. The group is 2 weeks. It's an intensive. The one-on-one or the self-guided is usually about over 4 to 5 weeks. And then I also do it one-on-one with clients that are usually a little bit bigger. Maybe they need a few team members on those. And that's about a 4-week process. Design is, 8 to 12 weeks. And then the amplify piece is, whatever additional ongoing support that they need. So that could be, short or ongoing.
And what is the amplify?
Amplify is really about, more brand coaching and supporting them. It's giving them the launch tools they need for here's how to launch your new brand, how to announce it to the world, how to let people know what they're doing. I give them my storytelling framework, which is how to figure out what your stories are and how they're relevant to your business. And then knowing, I have a belief that people are either typically oversharing or undersharing on social media, and both are hurting people. So this framework I've created really helps people understand, like, what should I share? When should I share it? And, is this going to hurt somebody else? So really just understanding from that perspective so that they can start to build relationships with people and share what they do through stories. And I think now with AI, it's even more important than ever to integrate personal stories into your brand, into your blog, into your social media, because, AI, ChatGPT can't, it can help you. I leverage it as a tool, but that human side is what is going to separate you from somebody who's creating content that is just purely AI.
So I was Googling is there a tool that helps with filtering HARO queries? So help a reporter out. So as a publicist PR, I'm subscribed to HARO, which is like at least 3 emails a day. So you're going through all these queries and like you miss a day or two and it's like there's all this opportunity you're missing. So I'm like, how can I be notified of an opportunity that's very pertinent to a client? And so I Googled this and I found this guy who does SEO training. And he's actually have this tab open, how to connect ChatGPT with Zapier and another platform called parse.io, I think. Essentially, what it does is it grabs the query that's relevant because you have to plop in all your details. It crafts or drafts the reply. And if you want, it can reply for you.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. So I started connecting it. I was like, you know what? Because I just want to test it out. However, what I'm seeing more and more almost every day now is in those HARO queries. So the journalist, the reporter, the writer puts out a query saying, hey, I'm writing an article about XYZ. If you're an XYZ, I'd love to talk to you. Here are the questions I want you to answer. But at the bottom, they'll always put like, please don't reply by AI or no AI response is welcome. Because if you've ever used ChatGPT, I mean, you think about it, it gets smarter and smarter the more people use it. However, if you don't know how to use the commands or the protocols, it actually pumps out something that just sounds the same all the time.
Yeah.
And journalists now, because they get pitched all the time, they see it, they know.
Yeah.
And so there is an absolute necessity in customization and personalization when it comes to creating your personal brand, your business's brand, but especially in replying to pitches or creating pitches. So I say AI is important if you're in a creative rut and you're like, I need some spark of inspiration, by all means, go ahead, do it. We use it for many things. And then we just build on top of that to make it our own.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think what I found is once we create this brand foundation document that we do in Brand Camp, I put all of that information about our client, including their brand personality. Like, this is how this brand talks, writes, shows up, so that the AI tool knows how to write in the tone of this business. We put in all of the benefits that they offer, the why statement, the positioning statement, all of this data. And we've actually been able to create website copy for our clients using the brand foundation document, ChatGPT, and then customizing it. But it gives us a solid framework to start with. Even when I write blog posts, right? I have the idea, I do the brain dump, right? The problem, I think, is that we all get in our own heads too much. And then you're editing it as you're writing. So this way you have the idea, you know what you want to write about, you do the brain dump, then you add in, you tweak it, you change it, you make it your own so it sounds more like you. And then it allows you to create more content, but content that isn't just generic
Yeah, I
content.
actually, the other day, while I was bored parenting, I grabbed my phone, opened up ChatGPT, and I asked it to write me a press release for one of my clients. And I inputted all the necessary inputs, things you can't say, quote words, things you must say, quote those words, about this person, about this program. And the result floored me.
Mm-hmm.
Floored me because
Yeah.
it is better than what I could have wrote. And all I needed to do was literally sprinkle in some personality. And I'm like, wow.
Boom.
So what scares me about this is now this is accessible to anybody. And to learn how to use this is free. And to have it
Yeah.
is free too. So on that question then, because we talk about creating tone, personality in what we see, hear, smell, feel with the brand,
Yeah.
what are the added benefits to AI? And where, more importantly, where's the downfall of AI in branding?
I think if you start so a downfall I see is people who are just using it to create content without clearly identifying what they want to be known for. So they're just kind of creating content for the sake of it, right? We are already overwhelmed with content and data and words. You know, I read a study, then this was years ago, that we see about 100,000 words a day. Now, I'm sure that that is exponentially more now. Not that we're reading them, but that we're bombarded constantly. So if you're, just creating content for the sake of it, it's actually could hurt your brand because people are going to stop listening and reading what you post. But if they know that when you post something that it's meaningful and thoughtful and articulate, that people are more likely to stick around. So to me, the downfall is that anybody can just create whatever. And some of it can be incorrect. I've used it and it has spat out complete garbage, incorrect facts, website, so you actually have to fact check it.
Yep.
So are people doing that? So it is a tool, just like anything else, that can be used for good or for evil, as they say. And I think it's really just looking at how you want to integrate it. Now, I think that we do have to integrate it in our business, and it can make our lives so much easier. As an example, for me, last year I wrote, I think, 7 blog posts the entire year. This year, I think I've written well over 20. And that is because I've been using ChatGPT, and it takes me a couple of hours rather than days of overthinking and just avoiding and not doing it, because I can easily I have to come up with the idea and the concept,
Yeah.
but it makes the timeline so much smaller, so then I can create really powerful content to share to my audience, to get in front of them every week instead of randomly sending out blog posts that I've created. And that has increased traffic on our website, visibility, thought leadership on topics. So that is a huge asset.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because part of what we do here at We Wild Women too is in PR, like one of our bigger programs is we do content marketing because it's still relevant. There's still a huge
Yeah.
SEO play. There's still that authority and credibility builder, but a lot of it is generating high quality content, which
Yeah.
still requires a human person to
Yep.
create that quality. And maybe there'll come a day AI is going to get so smart that it's just like it goes and it riffs off all of my tonalities and words that I use, and it can create great content. I know it's there because a client of mine took a couple podcast episodes of his wife because she has her own podcast
Yeah.
and managed to use her tone of voice to create podcast episodes where she's not even saying anything.
Wow.
They had it copy her voice, read a script, and it's like, unless you know the woman, it's like 88% sounds like her.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Then we
scary.
get into that challenge of like the deep fakes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we get into this point of questioning whether anything is real,
Yep.
right?
Totally.
Anything you read, pictures. Now I see a picture, and I remember somebody I know kept posting these kind of crazy photos on Facebook. Like, wow, I've never seen a bird that looks like this, or look at this tree. Isn't this wild? And then she found out that they were all AI generated, but she was sharing them as if they were real.
Okay.
And she's like, well, now I'm just going to not believe anything I see.
Yeah, it's tough. That's
So I think that's why authenticity, I know it's so overused, but that authenticity, that true voice of the brand is so much more important. You cannot get away with generic branding, generic content, and hiding and not really showing who you are in order to grow your business, because
no.
people will be suspicious.
And if you're marketing to Gen Z, they did the study where Gen Z, which is the generation younger than millennials, plus the younger millennials, what they want from a brand is authenticity. They want transparency and authenticity. They want to know where it's made, where it's sourced from, if everything you're saying is the truth. That's marketing. So, marketing for 2023 and going forward to the younger generation is about that transparency. If you're not doing it, then you'll be caught. And when you're caught, there's no turning back because trust is lost so easily with consumers these days. So
Yeah.
easily.
And I have to say, whenever I post a blog post that is more on the personal side, those always get so much more engagement.
Totally.
Always, without fail.
Yeah.
You know, there's always a business perspective I lend typically, but it's sharing that realness of who I am as a multifaceted woman, wife, mother, you know, daughter, world traveler, you know, all of that. And I think it's important that we show that we don't have to. There used to be, I always thought it was funny when there was that meme going around and it was like your LinkedIn profile picture and, you know, your Instagram and your Tinder and your whatever.
Thread.
I was like, no, it should be the same one on every platform, because I believe that you should be the same person on any platform. And I think that's, especially now with AI, it's that much more important. And I will share, I was listening to a talk at an event I was at by somebody who is an AI expert, which I'm like, I feel like AI is so new that it's like, is that, can we be AI experts as
Well,
we're
you can be an
all
expert
learning it?
in comparison to most people that aren't.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it was super fascinating. I just heard that relation, like somebody mentioned lately, can you really be an expert in AI? I was like, that's a valid question. Anyway, but definitely much more of an expert than anybody else there. And he was saying that he did a test where he did a blog and created content that was purely created by AI, and another one that was purely created by a human. And within a number of months, all of the AI generated blog posts had been unindexed on Google.
Oh, wow.
So
wow. And that's kind of the point of writing a blog post for the most part.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we kind of went down this rabbit hole, but I think it's so relevant to branding and positioning you to the work you do, to the work that I do, that authentic voice. And yes, leveraging AI tools to assist you, but it can't replace the human side that is important to be in there to, really show people who you are.
Yeah. And I was going to say, going back to like the personal blog posts that get the most views and reads. Secretly, anytime I post a picture with my husband on Instagram, it gets more likes and comments than anything else. And I'm like, well, poo-poo to you, Dan. But I know
he's kind of a big name too. So,
like husbands convert. And then Dan says the same thing about me too. He's like, blondes convert. I'm like, they do actually. There's a fact there. But okay, I love
You're a good team then.
Totally good team. The authenticity of branding. I love that. And I feel like that's going to be the topic of this, or the title of this podcast episode.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to sidebar this for 1 second, actually, maybe for the rest of our conversation, because I really want to ask you a question about funnels, because I was looking at your website and looking at some of the content you were sharing, and you essentially said that you were breaking up with funnels. And you're not the first person as of late that has said this. Can you explain why? And I know you're like, it's not for everybody, and funnels do work for some people. So we're just going to put that out there.
Totally.
But for you, why are you breaking up with them?
You know, I've tried many times, many different ways, and it just doesn't feel natural. And I think partially because I'm also doing a lot of that, I've had assistance, but a lot of it still stems from me. But it just doesn't feel, I mean, it was just hard to articulate. I'm like, I want to build my business on relationships. And maybe that feels like the hard way, but that is the easy way for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I get so much more joy than building a funnel. So, maybe one day when I have somebody and that's their whole role is just building the funnels and running them and bringing the leads in, I've got products that we could totally have funnels too, but it's not generating revenue and it's not bringing me any joy. And it takes a lot of my time and energy away from the things that really do bring me joy. And I just decided that if I'm not having fun doing it, I'm not doing it.
You just Marie Kondoed your marketing strategy. This is not bringing me joy. That's gone. And you know what I
Yeah.
love about this and the honesty from you saying this is when we build our businesses as women, this is my perspective. It's not everyone's perspective. We've often gathered our business knowledge from men because most of the business books have all been written by men. Now it's changing, I get that, but the greats,
Yeah.
right? And we've been told these are things you have to do to grow your business. Now all of a sudden they're like panicking because like if you've ever done funnel marketing before, there's a lot to set up. There's a lot of tech. And it is very intimidating. There's people that they are hired just to do that, and they're incredibly talented people. And I would never recommend anybody doing it themselves. But a lot of these business practices are like, hey, you should grow your business to $10 million. How dare you think less than that? Or it's like even talking with women, oh, they feel this pressure to grow their business to over $1 million because they don't feel like they've made it unless. And let me tell you one thing about that. I ran an agency that made over $1 million and I had employees and I had contractors. There was 12 of us. I am today paying myself the same that I did when I ran that 12-person agency as I do as a 2-person shop now.
Yeah.
I'm not going back to that. I will never go back to that. So there's
I'd like a team of 3. I want to be myself and Maria plus 1 who can do all of the back end stuff, the customer, all the things that I'm not good at, all the admin.
Yeah.
And I don't need to be bigger than that.
No. And why is there so much pressure to be? And I see even women giving this advice to other women like, oh, you got to think bigger, go bigger. But maybe the impact we are already creating, and it doesn't have to be 1 million people or 10 million people that we're trying to impact.
And then I think it's maybe redefining what bigger means.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? I have this could be a whole other conversation, but I have a process that I've created to lead a really intentional life. So I have 8 words that I live my life by. And every day I focus on what of those words am I, what are the focus of today? And I have a kind of a journal, a personal manifesto, and it written on the cover of it says, "My big, bold, beautiful life." And when I say big and bold and beautiful, like it's how I define it. It's not how anybody else defines big, right? I don't need to have a $10 million business, but I want to have a big, bold, beautiful life in my business, in my personal life, and, moving abroad and doing interesting things. And I think we get so focused on what does success mean and what does big mean and the judgment that comes with those words. And I think we just have to, I said, you have to get selfish and go inside and determine and redefine selfish. That's a whole topic of a new talk that I've got. But because it's such a word loaded with judgment. But I had to get selfish and figure out what I wanted so that I could live my big, bold, beautiful life. And that could have an impact on everybody else. That means I can be a better mother, wife, business owner, boss, entrepreneur, mentor, all of the things. But first I had to figure out who I wanted to be. Yeah. And so I don't define bigger or success by anybody else's measure.
I love it. And I get it. And I actually shared this on Instagram the other day, how I said, um, women especially need to stop being giving, having received accolades and being given praise because they've always put everyone else before them. You think you go to a funeral, you
Oh
go
yeah.
somewhere like, oh, so and so, Jenny was such a beautiful woman in the community. She always put everybody else first. Everyone else was always first.
I would
And
roll in my grave if somebody said that
well,
about me.
and I think it's
Yeah.
really a stupid way to live your
Yeah.
life. It is. And I don't, and there's people that are probably like, well, Renee, that's such a mean thing to say. It is stupid. Can we all stop, especially as women, as mothers, as entrepreneurs, to put everybody else first? That's
Yeah.
just like, that's not a fair life. And
Yeah.
by putting you first isn't like an absurd thing where every night you have to have a bath and you have to get your nails done and you gotta, no, no, no. No, it's do you. You do you. You show up how you want to show up because that's who you are, and stop telling other people how to live your life. That's putting
Yeah.
yourself first. Here I am
Yeah.
telling you how to live your life. But, anyways, I'm not a hypocrite.
I think, we've often been raised to have that belief that, being selfless is the right way. And that altruistic, I'm like, no, if it's to my detriment to make your life better, then 50% of the population is unhappy,
I think it's like,
right?
how many? I think there's 54% of the world are women, something like
Yeah.
that. But
So
I
if
say
we're
this,
only living for others,
being selfish is the most selfless thing you can do. Doesn't make sense to some people. It will someday. When it lands on them, they're like, aha, now I get it.
yeah.
Okay. One last question for you. Speaking
Okay.
about being selfish, what if I asked you, if you, what does it mean? Okay, starting over again. Joel, cut that out. One last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
I can't swear. So let me find another definition. I think it's doing life your way. It's not dimming your light. To me, it is showing up fully and wholly as myself, and all my scars and imperfections and beauty
And tattoos?
and tattoos and and saying I'm living my big bold beautiful life. That is, you know, that is being a wild woman, bucking the status quo.
I love it. You are a wild woman.
Thank you.
So, Laura, if people want to go online to find you or follow you, where can they go?
They can go to our website, which is labcreative.ca. You can find us on social. Our handle is labcreative inc on all the platforms. And you can follow me personally on Instagram and LinkedIn. Just look up Laura Beauparlant.
Amazing. All those are in the show notes. Laura, thank you so much for having us today.
Thanks, Renee.